Welcome to another Human Read audiobook by the United Marxist Pact Discord server, link below in the description. In this series, we continue our investigation into the initial construction, the organizational structure, and the principles and tactics of the form of worker organization capable of seizing political power and establishing the revolutionary proletarian dictatorship and communality, which can in turn produce the communist mode of production through the shared class interests of the workers of the entire world. Our goal is to compile, analyze, and elaborate on what all these texts have to say about this, and at the end to have a strong understanding of the exact scientific process of it, particularly in general terms. At the end of our readings as a whole, we will try to put it all together and present it as a coherent whole in an educational video with associated notations. Today's reading will be the 1951 Honorado Damen piece, Centralized Party Yes, Centralism Over the Party No. We have a pre-written textual analysis on the terms of the aforementioned topics, which is also posted in the pinned comment if you prefer to read it in the text, or follow the link in the description to a read-only version of my Google Docs notes. This will summarize the contents of the text, but is no replacement for the actual reading itself for the sake of understanding the context and full content of the piece. In addition, in the reading, I supply my own commentary, critiques, additions, etc., which may be helpful for understanding some particularities. I do not write down things that are repetitious or I feel completely inapplicable. Okay. Centralization is an unquestionable principle, and our method of organization cannot harm that. Making a distinction between methods robs from the actual dynamic process of reaching centralization. Rather, different circumstances determine how to reach it in given situations. It would be incoherent to claim that democratic or organic centralism succeeds in some form of greater or lesser numerical success in centralization to prove one method is better or worse. There is a constant dialectical relationship between the members and the party center. This dialectical relationship rests on the assumption that the party leadership develops tactical action, and dialectical process itself lends the Leninist principles of structure and operation, and thus greater centralization. However, the leadership cannot make all decisions by itself, or rely on a set of pre-planned moves, as it is unable to know everything that is necessary for action. The membership also cannot carry out decisions made by leadership usefully if they are uninvolved in the process of developing tactical action, as their ability to carry them out usefully rests on their own knowledge. To remove the working class from the decision making apparatus, the center creates a rupture between the members of the party and its directing center, which in turn instantly makes the central organ, as a body, operate outside the bounds and control of the organization's membership. Such a result must be resisted at all costs. There cannot arise any sort of division between the center and membership, wherein the membership is only supposed to carry out tasks presented to them by the center, and the center in turn is entrusted with the powers of foresight and divination, even if the center's leadership is greatly respected, skilled, and has the confidence of the entire party. No matter how respected someone is for whatever actions they have taken, they should never have any ability granted which places them outside or above the party as a whole, wherein they can arbitrarily develop theory or engage in functions of leadership. Rather, all of such must remain within the party, with the membership having the ability to, of their own initiative and consciousness outside the organic or democratic centralism, take actions based on their understanding of the class struggle's terrain and its history. Proactive action is key, and tailism is the greater dangers. Members need the ability to take action without waiting for confirmation from the center, as their local understanding will be superior. The dialectical relationship between membership and center integrates freedom and authority, and holds the solution to the problems of the class struggle under the conditions of violent and unchallenged authority. Any party, in order to become a living instrument of combat, requires iron unity and an organizational structure which supports such. This requires closed ranks against counter-revolution, while also being able to adapt its organizational structure to the objective conditions of the revolutionary struggle. This dialectical relationship between leadership and members cannot be hidden by terms of democratic or organic. Rather, these must be fused at all times, dynamically, in order to produce the correct path shown by Lenin. Ultimately, the tactical principle of the Revolutionary Party in action is to follow is to know the enemy and to know yourself. That is, the characteristics of the terrain on which a party takes action and the ability of its members to be prepared for tasks on that terrain. And real quick, I wanted to read this a little bit here. And it says that Lenin was successful because he had a very lively sense of history, which teaches us that revolution loves action and hates cowards who turn up a day late. And with that said, I will now begin the full audiobook reading. This is a very good piece. This will explain the full text that is being summarized here in such a way that you'll be able to understand what and why was extracted from it. I hope that you enjoy the full reading. So, Honorado Damen, 1951. Centralized party, yes. Centralism over the party, no. First published in the book Bordiga. Actually, here. We're going to type in Google Translate Italian, but whatever. The validity and limits of an experience in the history of the Italian left. Okay. We should first address the issue of centralization, which the programists have never been able to define in a, quote, organic way. Linked as it is to the interpretation of a given historical experience, it cannot simply be reduced to formal and scholastic abstractions. These muddle-headed, quote, left communists argue thus. In Lenin's International, there was no, quote, pure communist parties, so the use of the democratic mechanism was inexorably linked to what went at the particular historical time. It is therefore obvious that an international unlike the third, which consists of, quote, pure communist parties, should be identified by a different internal mechanism and not by democratic centralism, which ceased to be operative with the death of Lenin. What happened after that, in the Stalinist era, is not covered in their analysis because it had nothing to do with the working class and the objectives of the revolution. But to suppose, as a quote, programists do, an organization in a state of chemical purity, an international of, quote, pure communist parties, end quote, as opposed to that of Lenin made of, quote, impure parties, is playing with a metaphysical paradox. Instead of formulating the problem of a whole series of historical events through lenses of dialectical materialism, they adopt a formal, mechanistic calculation which tends to get lost in the fog of the most obsolete idealism. We can tell these comrades in all certainty that there will be no international or pure communist parties, but only an international that will reflect within it the good and the evil, the contradictions and absurdity of a society divided into classes, themselves torn by various layers of interest, social conditions, culture, etc. The assumption of communist parties in a pure state with an equally pure world organization, even as a simple aspiration, is not the result of any serious investigation based on Marxism. It strangely resembles a certain mysticism which had its heyday in the 20 years of fascism. Lenin's International certainly had its weaknesses, due to the immaturity of the historical period that followed the collapse of the Second International and the crisis then afflicting the capitalist world. Every proletarian organization reproduces, though in a more advanced way and on an inversely proportional scale, the characteristics of the historical period in which it was formed. And it is certain that the negative aspects present in the Third International will be present, although differently articulated in future international organizations, as amply proved by the objective conditions in which the various left communist groupings, who today claim the right to make a contribution to the reconstruction of the International Proletarian Party, are operating. Amongst these groups, the ones that suffers most from intolerance and crises is the Bordiga's, quote, communist program, where the dynamics of democratic centralism work more deeply, as seen as the explosive cycle of its internal contradictions. Today, for polemical convenience, the programists would like to pass off the Third International as made up of, quote, impure parties. But here's how Bordiga previously judged Lenin's International, in clear contradiction with the current positions. Quote, After restoring proletarian theory, the practical work of the Third International towered over the divisions raised by opportunists of all countries, and banning from the ranks of the world's vanguards all reformists, social democrats, and centrists of all types. This renewal took place in all the old parties and is the foundation of the new revolutionary party of the proletariat. Lenin guided with an iron hand the difficult task of dispelling all confusions and weaknesses. End quote. The real strength of these Bordigists lies in their inconsistency. How can this group, with its structure of an aristocratic and intellectual elite, with a filtered and distilled Marxism, develop in backrooms rather than the storm of class struggle, contest the accuracy of what we are saying? So then, how can we resolve with Leninist integrity the debate over the two phases of centralism? In the phase of imperialist domination, the proletarian revolution, no organization of the Revolutionary Party can conceivably exist which is not based on a highly centralized structure. Perhaps this is a feature that most dramatically distinguishes it from parliamentary parties. If centralism is therefore an imperative requirement imposed by class conflict, the attributes of, quote, democratic and, quote, organic define the subjective terms of a polemical distinction that has never affected the substance of the centralization. Who can say with absolute precision how far bodies involved in decentralization make use of the tools of democracy, active participation, and active control of the rank and file, and how far the centers of power are based on an authoritarian regime in the physical person of a leader, and through him, the Central Committee? For the Bordigists of Programa, the problem is posed in terms that come from the counter-revolutionary practice of Stalinism. This is how they tried, finally, to clarify their extraordinary theory that goes under the name of organic centralism. We have reproduced it above in the same words in which it was formulated. But we need to clarify once and for all the relationship that must exist between the center and the base so that the party is structured and operates according to Lenin's principles. An ongoing dialectical relationship exists between the members and the party center. It is obvious on the basis of that relationship, in the context of theoretical and political platform, already agreed that the party leadership develops its tactical action. Lenin never advocated, either in theory or in his political action, any other way in which the organization could act. And how can we understand the organizational formula of a central committee or leader who relies only on himself, on his capacity as it related to a, quote, set of already planned possible moves, our emphasis, in relation to no less foreseen outcomes, whilst the so-called membership, quote, can usefully be ordered to perform actions indicated by leadership? I'm going to add, this here, and we're going to continue a little bit more. It simply means the same as the policy of the Central Committee under Stalin. Once all working class elements have been eliminated from the dictatorship of the proletariat, it means a deep and irreparable rupture between the members of the party and its directing center, and a resulting slide into the open reconstruction of capitalism. It also means that the Central Committee of the Russian Communist Party and Stalin himself was tied to a, quote, set of possible moves that were perfectly planned in advance, that would be carried out with equal accuracy, in terms and in a reality we all know. What we are denouncing are the disastrous consequences which occur in a supposedly revolutionary party when its central organ as a body operates outside the bounds and control of the organization's membership. Okay, I'll get that. Where's the break here? It simply means here. Continue. But closer to our experience, we have to denounce precisely those who postulate, or allow to be postulated, this laughable distinction between a political membership required only to carry out acts indicated by the center, a center that is entrusted with such powers of foresight and divination that does not offer us a very encouraging sight. And here we are dealing with comrades who, in terms of preparation and long militancy, are highly skilled and command the respect and confidence of the whole party. Was the leadership of the Communist Party of Italy, PCDI, through Bordiga's declaration to the Comintern, perhaps not bound to a set of possible options to deny the possibility of fascism's rise to power, at the very time it was carrying out the March on Rome. And was this glaring error perspective not, quote, in correspondence with the no less foreseeable outcome, end quote, of jeopardizing the party with the tactic of the offensive for the offensive's sake? And who prepared a, quote, scientific analysis of the Russian economy, defining the October Revolution as an anti-feudal revolution after having celebrated as a socialist? Had Bordiga not affirmed in Lenin's in Lenin El Camino de la Revolution, quote, the revolution will be made in Russia by and for the working class itself, end quote. And further, quote, Soviet power was victorious. The dictatorship of the proletariat predicted by Marx made a tremendous entrance onto the stage of history. We're going to take this. Continuing. How should we judge someone who was the most prominent exponent of the party and of left-wing communism, quote, who refused to become a, quote, militant in the International Communist Party at the time of its formation, as he considered it a mistake to fight directly against, quote, the National Communist Party, the PCI. Footnote, the Italian Communist Party was formed under the leadership of Togliatti as a completely Stalinist party after the war. It dropped the old name of the Communist Party of Italy as a symbol that no longer had internationalistic pretensions. Continuing. With the excuse that the workers were in the party of Togliatti. Then, when our split occurred, agreed to enter the PCDI, provided that the rump remained true to him, politically neutered, and reduced to sector repeaters of not always digested formula. What was his contribution to the development of a critical examination of the nature of Second World War, and a role played by Russia as a major imperialist player? When he rejected our definition of state capitalism to speculate about Russia as a spurious form of, quote, industrial state. The questions could continue, but we have said enough to show how ill-founded, precarious, and objectively dangerous is his claim to assign to the Central Committee and this or that person, whatever their esteem, any skills of divination, the task of arbitrarily developing our theory, and functions of leadership outside and above the party as a whole. Okay, I'll take that. Lenin at his most personal and most decisive, by which we mean the Lenin of the, quote, April Theses, had a desperate determination to go to the sailors, beyond the formal organization of the Bolshevik Party's Central Committee, whose positions were based on misunderstanding and compromise. Lenin was not operating on organic or even democratic centralism here, but acting as the chief pillar of the coming revolution, the only one who had understood and endorsed the demands of the working class. And this is because his feet were firmly on a class terrain, because he thought and worked in class terms and for the class, and had a very lively sense of history, which teaches us that revolution loves action and hates cowards who turn up a day late. In this constant dialectical relationship between the membership and the leadership of the party, in this necessary integration of freedom and authority, lies a solution of a problem to which professional objectors have perhaps paid too much attention. Any revolutionary party which is not a mere abstraction has to address the problems of the class struggle in a historical climate in which violence and unchallenged authority dominates. In order to increasingly become a living instrument of combat, it can only be organized around the most iron unity. Its ranks, therefore, have to be closed around the general thrust of counter-revolution. The Revolutionary Party does not ape bourgeois parties, but obeys the need to adapt its organizational structure to the objective condition of the revolutionary struggle. Okay. The elementary tactical principle of the Revolutionary Party in action is that it must take into account the characteristics of the terrain on which it works, and that its members are adequately prepared for their tasks. We do not believe that there needs to be disagreement on the question of centralism. These only begin when we talk in, quote, democratic or, quote, organic terms. The use, or worse, the abuse of the word term organic can only lead to forms of authoritarian degeneration which break the dialectical relationship that must exist between the leadership and the members. The experience of Lenin is still valid, and it is vital to be able to fuse together in a single vision the seeming contradiction between, quote, democratic and, quote, organic centralism. And that is the text. We'll go back and summarize the stuff and present them. But in effect, what this is doing is saying, hey, look, this organic centralism has a tendency to lead to the base, the center separating away from the base as this intellectual, and I've termed it in my own ways as a tribal elder circumstance, wherein you get these people who have large amounts of respect. People have large amounts of respect for them, continually having the time and ability to sit in and argue in particular ways. And people organize around these people, and it's its own form of cliquism. And over time, these people get more and more separated from the masses, from the struggle, and so on and so forth. And people don't even bother thinking about what it is that they have to say. They just go ahead and do it. And, this is in many times a very effective and organic and natural way for these things to develop. You get favored debate leaders. Like in the New Atheist movement, right? You had Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and stuff. And through their incredible skills and speaking and whatnot, they found themselves being watched by everybody. And people cheer them on, like, "Woo, Christopher Hitchens beat up those religious folk or whatever in debate." And then they don't really think about what arguments are being made and consider, like, Sam Harris, right? Sam Harris makes all these arguments, and then his arguments end up trending over to entirely unrelated things. He ends up talking about, he's not talking about atheism, he's suddenly talking about race science and shit like that. And people keep those relations. So, this is the contradiction here, right? Being a specialist in one thing makes people listen to you, and then being a specialist in one, and then the people who listen to you also listen to you talk about other things, which is a problem. It's a personality cult sort of thing. And yeah, the base needs to remain knit together. Now, in this text, Damen doesn't talk about really what the solution is. Perhaps he will in later ones. But he is clearly saying, hey, look, we need to kind of fuse democratic and organic centralism together. And hopefully we will get more information on what that looks like. And that is the text. Thank you for attending.